So now we are going to look more in depth of what the heart is actually looks like, and from there we're going to know the parts and the anatomy of the heart. So if you look at here very quickly, you can see that these are the heart. So before we actually learn about the anatomy of the heart, the first thing that you need to know about the heart is the medical terms for the position. So these are the anterior sides, which is the front, and then these are the posterior side, which is the back. These are the superior sides, the superior positions, and these are the inferior position. Hold on, I'm just quickly, yeah, these are the inferior position, right? So you can see here that these are the hearts, right? So now the other things that I wanted to point out is the fact that right and left are actually flipped. Normally these would be the right side and these would be the left side, right? But in medical, or like if we're learning about the anatomy, you have to flip your perspective because we're looking at the person's perspective. We are looking at the patient's perspective, right? So if I turn this on, see, you might think that these are the right side and these are the left side. But actually, if you look at the patient's perspective, these are actually the right side and these are actually the left side. So which is why we are going to flip the entire perspective of what's left and what's right. Now if you look here carefully, the heart is divided into four chambers. There's the dexter. So yeah, before I mention the dexter and sinistra, you might get confused. So in the medical term, right means dexter and the left means sinistra. So yeah, basically that's what I like to point out before you guys get confused of what actually means, what the dexter and sinistra actually means. Did you know that the heart actually matches our fist? So the size of the heart is actually the same size as our fist. It's actually kind of cool. I'm sorry. So yeah, these are the right atrium and these are the right ventricle, and then we're going for, and then if we look at here, these are the left ventricle, or these are the left atrium. If you want to be a little bit more fancy with the medical terms, yeah, these are the dextra atrium, and these are the dextra ventricle, and then these are the sinistra ventricle, and these are the sinistra atrium. Yeah. Just to clarify about the atrium. So if you can see the atrium here. Okay, so starting with the atrium, the dextra atrium here. So we know that the dextra means right and sinistra means left, right? So if we can see from the dextra atrium, the blood comes in from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, all together through the passing through to the atrium, the dextra atrium. So from here, the blood goes in from the dextra atrium all the way to the dextra ventricle. So how does it goes in from the dextra atrium to dextra ventricle? So there's this thing called the valve. Here we can see here for the valve. The valve, if you can see it, if you're very careful, if you can see it in a brief second there's three like leaflets opens, right? So you can see that this was the first one, the second one, and then the third one. I'm sorry. There. You can see that these are what's called the tricuspidalis valve. So the tricuspidalis valve acts as a barrier between the atrium dextra with the ventricle dextra. So yeah, the blood goes in after the blood goes from the dextra atrium, it goes into the dextra ventricle. Now from here, we know that ventricle is the one who's actually has the ability to pump blood. It's not the atrium, it's the ventricle. So the ventricle pumps the blood, and then the blood goes into the pulmonary tract here. And you can see the barrier here. If you can see it very carefully, it's called the semilunar pulmonary valve, right? So the blood goes through this side of the pulmonary artery, right? If you can see, it goes into the pulmonary artery, the sinistra pulmonary artery and the dextra pulmonary artery, right? So I would like to point out the blood that flows in the right chamber and in the dextra chamber and the sinistra chamber. So the chamber means this area called the dextra sides of the heart and the sinistra side of the heart. So the blood that travels from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava all the way through the dextra atrium and dextra ventricle, those bloods are deoxygenated, meaning they are not they don't have oxygen in their bloods. So their roles, the ventricle, the dextra atrium and dextra ventricle uh, plays the role as to bring the blood into the lungs to get oxygen. So from here, it divided into two bits. You can see the bits here. If you see it from the front, the dextra pulmonary artery and the sinistra pulmonary artery all act as a pathway for the blood to travel into the lung to get oxygen. And then after that, the blood then travels back through the lungs, travels back to the heart from this side. You can see here, this is the dextra pulmonary artery.
So yeah, I made a mistake there. That's not supposed to be the pulmonary artery. It's supposed to be the pulmonary vein or the pulmonary vena. I made a mistake there. I'm so sorry. But please continue the video knowing that it's actually the pulmonary vein and not the pulmonary artery. Thank you very much.
All right, so both of the um, both of the oxygenated oxygenated blood from the lungs goes back into the heart, right? So where does it go next? So it goes next to the sinistra atrium. So it travels here. So yeah, here you can see here it travels from and this particular bits here, as well as this part, each and every one, the dextra and sinistra. The blood travels in to the sinistra atrium, right? And then the blood passes through the bicuspidalis valve. Okay, so the blood travels from the artery, right? The sinistra artery, sinistra atrium. I'm very sorry. It travels there and goes into the mitral valve here. It's what's called the mitral valve. In Indonesia, we call it katup bicuspidalis, or here it is mentioned as the atrioventricular valve. So then the blood goes inside the chamber, the sinistra ventricle, and then it travels through this valve here. If I could zoom it correctly. There we go. This valve is called the semilunar aortic valve. So what does this valve do? So remember, as I told you before, the role of the sinistra ventricle is to pump the blood, right? And to pump the blood, and the sinistra ventricle pumps the blood into the whole body through the aorta, right? So in order to do that, there must be a valve here. Why? Because if you can see it here, the blood was pumped, right? And there was a valve. There's a semilunar aortic valve that act so that the blood wouldn't flow back into the sinistra ventricle. So that is the idea of why there's a semilunar aortic valve, and there's a semilunar, and we have also here in the dextra sides, the dextra part of the heart. It's called the semilunar. What was it called? Semilunar pulmonary valve, right? Pulmonary valve. Sorry. So yeah, the blood then goes back to the aorta, and from then the blood travels superior and inferior through the whole body, through the aorta and the artery. And then the process repeats after there's a intracellular respirations process, and then the oxygen will be the oxygen will get exchanged into carbon dioxide, travels into the the vena, and then goes back in from whichever sides it was from, whether it's the superior sides or the inferior sides. So yeah, that is the anatomy of the heart. Alright, so to wrap things up, we're going to go over things that we've been discussing regarding the cardiovascular system. So there are a few things that needs to be highlighted regarding the cardiovascular system organ. The main organ in the system are the heart and the blood vessels. The heart consists of two different parts with four different chambers: the dexter atrium, the dexter ventricle, the sinistra atrium, and the sinistra ventricle. And there are four different valves in the heart: the tricuspid valve, which separates the dexter atrium and the dexter ventricle; the semilunar pulmonary valve, which is located in between the dexter ventricle and the pulmonary artery. These valves play a role in preventing the blood from flowing back inside the dexter ventricle. The bicuspid valve, which separates the sinistra atrium and the sinistra ventricle; and the semilunar aortic valves, which are located in between the sinistra ventricle and the aorta. Now we're going into the blood vessels. So the blood vessels, there are types of blood vessels in the human body, and in the cardiovascular system. There's arteries, there's vena, and there's capillaries. I didn't mention a lot about capillaries in the video, but I will get to it in a second. So for the arteries, there's aorta, artery, pulmonary arteries, and arterioles. So arterioles, if you haven't knew already, the arterioles is the smallest form of the artery. And then for vena, we have the superior, inferior vena, pulmonary veins, and venules. Venules are also the same as arterioles. The venules are the smallest form of the vena. And the capillaries. Now this is where it gets interesting. So remember when I told you that the whole cardiovascular system runs from the artery, started from the vena, inferior and superior, and goes through the whole body after going through the whole process of the cardiovascular system through the artery. Now, after those cellular respirations that we have, that the body needs the oxygen from the blood then has a lot of carbon dioxide, which then travels from vena and goes, it's either from the inferior sides of the superior side, hence creating the blood vessels type, which is the vena. That is the important thing. And I feel like capillaries, I don't really mention a lot about capillaries, but those are the functions: smallest form of the blood vessels, and connect arteries and veins. And then there's a few things that I haven't mentioned in the video, which are the intraventricular septum. And I think that is the most important thing, because it actually helps create a partition, or you would say separates in between the ventricles, in between each types of ventricles, so the dexter ventricles and the sinistra ventricles, as well as the heart muscles layer, which the heart muscles that pumps the blood in the heart. Myocardium is the one who's responsible for all of that. I feel like the information is enough for everyone to take as a beginner in anatomy, especially when studying the cardiovascular system. I guess there's nothing else for me to say. I'll see you in the next lesson. Peace out.